Yeah, so I'm back, and here we are with this track from Sarkodie. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, baby girl, make you not try me. Yeah, don't try. I never thought I was gonna be on this wave, cause I was ready to take a couple things to my grave. First off, let me clap for you, baby, you brave, but you can't pick and choose what to say, please behave. Well, be on some out, so him, if you wanna talk, you gotta tell the world every other nigga you fuck. You can't just split the victim and paint a picture like you were just looking for love from all the dicks that you suck. I'm not gonna sit here and lie, we had a thing. First though, I thought you were cool till I had a hint. Now me face the boys, I clock it with the baddest bitch. That's a sign of yin and since I saw Cuban legs. I was trying to stay away from you, but then you came. Whatever someone you mean, I'm the one to be played. Okay, of course, I thought that you were trying to start another drama. I'll be boy from the street, I know the game. Yes, I was.
So here we are, Sarkodie obviously goes into the studio and does his thing, rapper. So you know the use of a beats and talking over the beats, rapping over the beats, and trying to respond to what our own Yvonne Nelson put out in her book that is making the rounds. And so here we are with this call and response, as it were. And this has to do with what Yvonne wrote in her book about their relationship when both of them were coming up, and it seems that there was some issue, a pregnancy, and how the two of them resolved to try to deal with it. And in a sense, there's when the book makes the claim that Sarkodie was disinterested in the pregnancy and therefore there was an abortion and all of that. And Sarkodie thinks, when you listen to this track, that the facts were not as they were, and so he responds. And he responds with this track, this tune, that will also, be essentially immortalized. It will be there for all time, locked in the cyber sphere or cybersphere. And Yvonne too has written a book, so that one also has this immortality in a sense. So both of them creatives trying to respond to an issue, and this essentially is my take. I always want to have my take, taking the gown to the streets, and in that sense also allowing we scholars to have our say on events, both local and international. Now you see that at a point I intervened in terms of the track, and at that particular point where I intervened, Sarkodie talks about, or he mentions the street. Sarkodie actually mentions the street twice in this track. At the point where I intervened, and then at the end where he mentions Yvonne Nelson and says actually that Yvonne Nelson is from the streets. Now, when you unpack this, you see that the track bears subliminal messages. Essentially, it bears a subliminal message that is connected to a certain sociological framing of the Ghanaian political economy. And so streets essentially is one part of a binary. The second binary is a soft, cushy life, So the streets are hard, they are mean, they are tough. And the contrary of that is a bougie life, a bourgeois life. And that bourgeois life, when you are growing up in Ghana, is captured in what we say in the local parlance as dadaba, daddy's child. And so that means that you have a good life. There's a mama, there's the papa in the house. They usually will put you in a car, send you to school and pick you up, maybe Morning Star where I went, and then there's GIS and the other top school association back in my day, Engelbert, Richchurch, Bishop Bowers, lately now, Lutheran, TIS, and the rest of them, right? So we see here certain message that speaks to the Ghanaian context in terms of childhood and the family setup and how all of that works out in terms of the child or the children and how their world is directed. So Sarkodie refers to this, and in doing that, he sets the tone for what it is that he tried to do, defend his reputation. And at the core of this, you see that the actors in this drama, Sarkodie himself and Yvonne, both of them have issues with their fathers. Yvonne is in a lifelong search for who was his father. Sarkodie himself, you know, when you listen to his earlier tracks, he mentions his mother usually, always, constantly. The father rarely comes in. And Yvonne too, the mama is her pillar, you know. So you have these two personalities dealing with their deepest questions about their parents and to be precise, the father figure and all of that, and how all of that framed their lives. And so essentially what Sarkodie does with mentioning of the street is that they had to struggle, and in their struggle they had their stars and their scars. And luckily they were blessed with their talents, and both of them had to tap into that to become what it is that they have become. And in a sense, it opens our eyes to the Ghanaian condition, the struggles of the particular Ghana that we have built over the last 40 years when both of them grew up, and what it means in that political economy not to have a home, as it were, an ideal home, and the struggles that makes the struggle even more, you know, strained to try to find yourself. And so in the book and in this track, there's a certain sobriety for me in terms of how they had to navigate their childhood and find themselves. And so I think that's food for thought. What the home means ultimately for, you know, the children born into it and coming up without a father, and how that places the burden on the other parent, usually the mother, and you know what she has to go through to direct these children to become what they are. And it tells us how important it is for the kind of society that we build, so that in the event of this or these complications, every child, whether they are dada bars or they are from the streets, as Sarkodie puts it, will have a fair shot, you know. And talking of the streets then brings me to another important person who this week was honored. You know, Busta Rhyme also reflects this family question, and here in the diaspora, Busta Rhyme was given the Lifetime Award by BET for his work, and he has an important track where he, on the album The Big Bang, where he talks about his upbringing and his father and mother and how he got into hip-hop and made his mark, you know. And I thought that to celebrate this phenomenal guy, I remember coming up, we used to listen to him, you know. Dangerous made the rounds in Accra around the time Reggie Rockstone himself was coming up with his stamp of creativity on the Ghanaian scene. I think it was around that time that Makan was dropped, you know. So let's listen to Busta Rhymes quickly here. And the track is Been Through the Storm. Busta Rhymes, Been Through the Storm. He talks about his mother and father. They came from Jamaica and tried to make a life. Green card and all of that in America, and he ended up in New York. It's taking a bit of a time to load up, but let's